Laos is often described as one of Southeast Asia's most mysterious countries, hidden between larger neighbors like Thailand, Vietnam, and China. But to understand how Laos works today, both politically and economically, you need to explore a concept that shaped the country for centuries: economic royalism. This isn't just about kings and palaces. It's about how wealth and power have been concentrated in the hands of elites, and how that concentration of privilege has defined Laos from its ancient kingdoms, through French colonization, into the monarchy of the 20th century, and even into modern times under communist rule. The story begins with the Kingdom of Lan Xang, founded in the 14th century. Known as the Land of a Million Elephants, Lan Xang was built around a system where the monarchy and aristocracy controlled land and resources. Rice farming was the foundation of life, and land ownership meant power. The king and noble families granted land rights to those loyal to them, creating a system where ordinary villagers worked the land, while the royal class extracted tribute and labor. This wasn't unique to Laos, but it set the stage for centuries of elite control over economic life. Religion played a role as well. Buddhism became deeply entwined with the monarchy, and temples were supported by royal donations. But these donations weren't just spiritual gifts, they were also a display of wealth and power, showing how much surplus the elites could command from society. Temples themselves became centers of economic life, further strengthening the link between the monarchy and material control. When the French arrived in the 19th century, they saw this royal structure as a convenient tool. French colonial administrators maintained the monarchy, but stripped it of real independence. Kings and princes were kept as symbolic rulers, while the French extracted resources and built their own economic networks. Yet the monarchy was still used to collect taxes, enforce labor systems, and maintain social order. The elites benefited as intermediaries. For ordinary Lao people, little changed. Wealth and power were still concentrated at the top. By the mid-20th century, after World War II, Laos entered a new era. The French gradually moved toward granting independence, and by 1947 the Kingdom of Laos was formally established under King Sisavangvong. On paper, Laos had sovereignty, but in reality it depended heavily on French and later American aid. The monarchy and its allies controlled the government, and with it, access to foreign money. This was the height of what can be called modern economic royalism in Laos. Royal family members and elite politicians held key economic positions. Foreign aid, instead of being distributed widely, often flowed through elite networks, reinforcing their power. Land ownership remained unequal, and rural farmers continued to live at subsistence levels, while urban elites benefited from connections to foreign donors. In a country as poor as Laos, even modest sums of foreign money created significant privileges. But the monarchy faced challenges. During the 1950s and 1960s, Laos was caught up in the Cold War. Different factions emerged: the Royalists, the Neutralists, and the Communist Pathet Lao. While the monarchy tried to preserve its privileges, the Communists built support among rural populations who felt excluded from elite wealth. Economic royalism became one of the criticisms used against the monarchy, that a small group controlled too much while ordinary people had too little. In 1975, the monarchy fell. The Pathet Lao took control, declaring the Lao People's Democratic Republic. The king was dethroned, and the royal family disappeared into exile or captivity. Economic royalism, at least in its traditional form, seemed to be over. Land reforms were introduced, private businesses were restricted, and industries were nationalized. In theory, wealth would now be redistributed, and ordinary Laos citizens would benefit. But in practice, a new form of elite control soon appeared. Communist rule did not eliminate inequality. It simply changed who the elites were. Party officials and their families gained influence over the economy. State-owned enterprises became vehicles for those in power to control resources. Land, while officially belonging to the people and the state, was effectively managed by local authorities with ties to the ruling party. Foreign influence didn't disappear either. Instead of France or the United States, Laos turned to the Soviet Union and later to Vietnam and China for support. Foreign aid and investment still flowed into the country, and once again, elites acted as gatekeepers. This mirrored earlier patterns of economic royalism, even though the monarchy was gone. In the 1980s, Laos faced serious economic difficulties. Isolated from Western markets, dependent on aid, and with little industrial development, the country struggled. In 1986, the Lao government introduced the new economic mechanism, opening the country to market reforms. This allowed private businesses to return, foreign investment to grow, and a degree of capitalist activity to take hold, though always under state supervision. This shift created new opportunities for economic elites. Families with political connections could benefit from access to foreign investors, joint ventures, and contracts. While officially communist, Laos developed an economy where privilege and power determined who succeeded. Some analysts describe this as a modern continuation of economic royalism, only now rooted in party loyalty rather than royal blood. One of the most visible examples today is land development. Foreign companies, often from China, Thailand, and Vietnam, have invested heavily in Lao land and infrastructure. Deals are frequently negotiated at the highest levels of government, and local communities sometimes have little say in the process. While such investments bring growth, they also reinforce patterns where elites control access to wealth. Hydropower is another case. Laos has branded itself the battery of Southeast Asia, exporting electricity from dams on the Mekong River and its tributaries. Yet dam projects are typically managed by state-linked enterprises or foreign companies with elite backing. The benefits flow upward while the costs, such as displacement of villagers or environmental change, are borne by rural populations. Tourism, too, has become a significant industry. Cities like Luang Prabang attract international visitors, and while tourism creates jobs, much of the profit goes to businesses with government ties. This reflects once again how access to resources and connections can define economic success in Laos. So, what does all of this mean? The history of Laos shows that economic royalism is not just about monarchy. It's about a structure where wealth and decision-making are concentrated in the hands of a few. The names and faces of the elites have changed from kings and princes to colonial administrators to party officials, but the basic dynamic has remained. For ordinary Laos citizens, this often means limited access to opportunity. Rural communities continue to rely on subsistence farming, while urban centers see more concentrated development. The gap between those with connections and those without remains significant. Still, Laos has seen progress. Poverty rates have declined in recent decades, literacy has improved, and infrastructure has expanded. But the benefits of modernization are uneven, and critics argue that the legacy of economic royalism persists. Today, Laos presents a paradox. It is a communist state, yet it operates with networks of privilege and influence that resemble older systems of royalism. Economic power remains tied to political power, and for many Lao people, the patterns of elite dominance remain familiar. In the end, understanding economic royalism in Laos helps explain the country's past and present. From the land grants of the Lan Xang kings to the foreign aid channeled through the 20th century monarchy to the state enterprises controlled by party elites today, the story is one of continuity. Systems may change, but the concentration of power endures. For viewers and travelers, Laos offers rich culture, beautiful landscapes, and deep traditions. But beneath the surface lies a complex history of how wealth and privilege have shaped the nation. By looking at economic royalism, both in its royal and post-royal forms, we gain insight into how Laos became the country it is today. Thanks for watching. Have you ever visited Laos?